Good evening. Welcome to the third class in a series on Shabbat home. Today we're going to continue with Shabbat day itself, the meals on Shabbat, the Havdalah, and then we will cover what you are allowed to say to a non-Jew and what you're not supposed to, and what happens if a non-Jew does work for you on Shabbat. We mentioned that you are supposed to eat 3 meals on Shabbat, and that is because in the olden times people used to eat only twice during the day. When they would wake up, they would eat around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, sometime before noon, and then they would wait another 6, 7 hours, and they would eat again 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and that's it. And so for Shabbat to be special, we eat 3 meals on Shabbat. And we said last time that the main meal on Shabbat is the day meal. And therefore, your best food should be saved for the day meal. And for all 3 meals, ideally you should eat bread. But at least the first meal, the night meal, and Shabbat day, you need to have bread. Seudah Shlishit, ideally you should have bread, but if a person is not hungry or doesn't want to eat bread, you're allowed to eat pastry, mizonot, and if even that is hard, at least eat other foods, fruits, vegetables, meat, fish. And what is the minimum amount of bread? In order to say Birkat Hamazon, you need to eat 1 kezayit. 1 kezayit, let's say it's about 1 ounce. So if you want to fulfill the mitzvah of eating the meal so that you can say Birkat Hamazon, you need to eat 1 ounce of bread. And that has to be eaten within 7 minutes. Otherwise, it's considered not as 1 meal, but as 2 different meals. If you eat a little bit now and a little bit in 10 minutes from now, that's not considered part of the same meal. However, preferably you should eat 2 kezeitot, which means 1 kabeitza, which is anywhere between 1.5 to 2 ounces of bread. And this way, you will be able to wash your hands with a blessing. As we mentioned last week, you can only make a blessing on washing hands, al netilat yadayim, if you're planning to eat 1.5 to 2 ounces of bread. If you're planning to eat less than 1.5 ounces of bread, the volume of kabeitza, you wash your hands, but you don't make a blessing. And it's important to eat fish by all 3 meals. If possible, if a person enjoys it, he should eat fish all 3 meals. If a person does not enjoy fish, then he's not obligated to eat fish. Similarly, it's good to eat meat the first 2 meals, by Friday night and Shabbat day. If a person for some reason doesn't like meat, doesn't enjoy meat, then he's not obligated to eat meat.
So if we don't want to eat mizonos, bread and mizonos, then what goes after for the shashas, for the vegetable?
If a person cannot eat bread for Seudah Shlishit, the 3rd meal, he eats pastry, and if he cannot eat pastry, he eats anything else, fruits, vegetables, or meat, or fish. After Shabbat, we eat the 4th meal, and that is called Milave Malka, which means escorting the queen. And it is also called the Seudah of David HaMelech, the meal of King David. Why? And that is for 2 reasons. One is that on Shabbat, we say that Mashiach cannot come. And when Shabbat finishes, we're happy that perhaps he's going to come now. The entire Shabbat, we didn't even wait because we know he cannot come. But once Shabbat is over, we start to wait, expect him again. and we make a meal in celebration that he might be coming any moment. And the second reason why it's called the meal of King David is because David HaMelech asked Hashem, tell me when I'm going to die. And Hashem said, I'm not going to tell you. You're not allowed. So he said, okay, please at least tell me which day of the week. So Hashem said, Shabbat. And David bargained with Hashem. He said, maybe Friday. It's not nice to die on Shabbat because people cannot take care of you. Hashem said, no, I want you to die on Shabbat because an extra day of your prayers, of your songs, to me are very precious. I cannot take you a day earlier. And he said, why not Sunday? And he said, no, Sunday already is the time for your son, Shlomo, to be the king. And you cannot interfere with your children. You have to leave them to live their life, cannot take over. And so David HaMelech said, okay. And what did he do? Every Shabbat now, he thought maybe the last Shabbat, because Hashem didn't tell him which Shabbat, and therefore every time Shabbat came, the entire Shabbat he would pray, he would be careful, he would learn Torah, and as soon as Shabbat finished, he would make a celebration. Every time Shabbat finished, he would make a big meal, he would invite friends to celebrate that Hashem gave him another week to live. And that is why we also celebrate in commemoration that David HaMelech had another Shabbat to live. Preferably, one should eat bread for Milava Malka as well, but if a person is not hungry from all the meals of Shabbat, he can eat pastry, and if he cannot eat even pastry, at least eat something. Take a fruit, a vegetable, and keep in mind I'm eating it for Milava Malka. Ideally, it should be eaten right after Shabbat. Some people make Havdalah, and right after they wash hands and eat Milava Malka. But as long as you eat it within the first 4 hours after Shabbat, that's good. And b'diavad, if that's difficult, try to eat it before midnight. So now we go on to Havdalah. Just like it's a mitzvah to sanctify Shabbat with words over the cup of wine when it comes in, it is also a mitzvah to sanctify Shabbat with words over a cup of wine when Shabbat departs. And we call that Havdalah. So we take a cup of wine, we take besamim, spices, fragrant spices, and a candle. First, we make a blessing on wine, as usual. Then the blessing on fragrant spices, and then the blessing on the candle. And after these three blessings, we make the actual blessing of Havdalah. The main blessing is the last blessing of Havdalah, the longest. And in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Havdalah, you have to hear that blessing. Both men and women need to hear Havdalah. And therefore, even if you didn't pay attention by the first blessing, by the second blessing, by the third blessing, but at least by the fourth blessing, or the blessing of Havdalah itself, you need to pay attention. If the man is not available to make the Havdalah, then the woman can make Havdalah for the whole family. And even if someone already made Havdalah in a synagogue, he can still make Havdalah for his family second time. Or even if you made it for your family and another person comes in who didn't hear Havdalah and he doesn't know how to do it, you can make Havdalah as many times as necessary to help other Jews to fulfill the mitzvah. Before you do Havdalah, we are not allowed to eat or drink, except for water. If a person is thirsty, he is allowed to drink water, but no food and no other drink, not even tea or coffee, only pure water. Before yes?
From when are you not allowed to eat?
from the moment you finish your Seudah Shlishit, you make the blessing of Birkat Hamazon, you don't eat and you don't drink. If necessary, you can drink water.
What time should that third meal be at?
That's a good question. The third meal should ideally be after a person prays afternoon prayer, mincha, and before sunset. But diavad, if it's not possible to pray mincha before, then you can eat the third meal first and then pray mincha. And b'diavad, if it's already sunset, you still have 13 minutes after sunset to start your third meal, Seudah Shlishit. And if you missed even that, then you don't eat the third meal.
Just 13 minutes after sunset?
13 minutes after sunset,
That's the
yes.
latest.
That's the latest. And one more thing about Seudah Shlishit is if you washed for bread and you started eating before the 13 minutes are up, you can continue as long as you want. And even though it's already an hour after sunset, hour and a half, you can still continue eating as long as you didn't say Birkat Hamazon. However, if you didn't wash for bread, you decided only to eat pastries or only to eat fruits and vegetables, then you're supposed to stop as soon as sun sets or for a few minutes after sunset. But since you're not within the meal, so every moment is a separate moment, as opposed to if you started the meal, everything goes after the beginning of the meal. So if you washed, then you're within the meal, and if your meal started on time, you can continue. But if you're not within the meal, you should stop by sunset. So for this additional reason, it's good to wash and eat bread. This way you have an extra hour to eat.
How do we calculate sunset?
Sunset is when the sun disappears from the horizon. On the calendar, some calendars write on Friday the time of sunset, some write this time of candle lighting, which is 18 minutes before. So if your calendar says candle lighting time, so you add another 18 minutes to that.
And 13 to that?
And then 13 additional minutes to that as a b'diavad, as after the fact. If you missed sunset, you can still eat Seudah Shlishit for 13 minutes. Yes.
My calendar doesn't say anything, it just says the time.
If your calendar doesn't specify, then you have to check. 1 week, take it and check against another calendar, or ask somebody when is sunset, and then compare, and then you'll figure out what your calendar shows.
I'm sorry, you can start eating the third meal on time. As
Yes.
long as you wash for bread and you're eating bread, you can continue eating until actually having to do Halacha.
Yes, as long as you started before sunset or within 13 minutes, you can continue that same meal until you want to finish it, or until you say Birkat Hamazon or Arvit. Now, usually we eat Seudah Shlishit, we say Birkat Hamazon, and then we go to pray the evening prayer, Arvit, and then we come home and we do Havdalah. If the order is reversed, that's okay. For example, if the person stayed home and was eating Seudah Shlishit and Shabbat finished, he is allowed to make Havdalah even though he didn't pray Arvit yet. And then he can go to the synagogue and pray. Let's say that particular synagogue or that particular minyan is late. And sometimes that happens. For example, if there is a special event, Motzei Shabbat, and they want people to come to the synagogue and they want people to bring their whole family, so they say, let's make evening prayer late so that everybody can come by cars. So then you can eat Seudah Shlishit, say Birkat Hamazon, and do Havdalah, and then drive to the synagogue and pray evening prayer. And as an aside, by the way, you can do a similar thing Friday night. For example, let's say you live in a place where there is only one minyan for evening prayer, Friday night, and that's very late. Let's say they pray an hour after sunset. And you don't want to wait so long to pray evening prayer and then come home and make Kiddush. So you're allowed to pray Mincha early. You're allowed to say Kabbalat Shabbat by yourself. And then you can make Kiddush and eat your meal. And then at the end of the meal or in the middle of the meal, you can go and pray the evening prayer. This way, your children will be able to participate in the meal, and this way you will be able to pray with the minyan as well. This, according to some, it's lechatchila. Sometimes when things are not lechatchila, in some situations, in other situations they are lechatchila. For example, if you have a whole family waiting and they're tired, so then you don't make them suffer. You start the meal early, you make kiddush and the whole meal first, and then you pray arvit. If nobody is waiting and you can pray first, it's better to pray first.
And in our community, like we have so many shuls.
Yes, if you have shuls, then just go to an earlier minyan. Now, just like we don't eat before Havdalah, we're not supposed to do any work before Havdalah unless you say Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol, which means in a different formula you say basically the same thing, that now it's not Shabbat anymore. It used to be Shabbat until now, now it's a weekday. But even if you say Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol, you still cannot eat or drink until you make the actual Havdalah.
You turn on lights after you say that?
After you say Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh lechol and you waited enough time, whatever you wait until after the end of Shabbat, some people wait, according to Rabbeinu Tam, 72 minutes, some people wait 60 minutes, and their earliest wait 45 minutes. So it's recommended to wait 72 minutes, but if somebody cannot, he can rely on opinions that say 60 minutes or 45 minutes. Yeah.
I have a question about Havdalah. Like, I've seen some women, they just do the wine and the spices, but they don't do lighting up the candle. Is that halacha or?
Yes, everybody should do the same Havdalah with the wine, with the spices, and with the candle. And I'm going to speak about the candle later, but just because the woman is alone or the husband is not there does not mean that Havdalah becomes shorter. It's still the same Havdalah. Now, how do we do the Havdalah actually? Yeah?
I didn't understand the 45 minutes, 72 minutes.
After sunset, is it already the next day or not? So, on Friday night, we rule that as soon as it's sunset, Shabbat began. However, at the end of Shabbat, Saturday night, we are strict and we say even though sunset, the new day didn't begin yet. It's still Shabbat. And therefore, you have to wait a little longer until 3 stars come out. When 3 stars come out, 3 medium stars, then it's considered night. And there is an argument, when do they come out? Some say it's 45 minutes, some say 50 minutes, some say 60 minutes, and some say 72 minutes. So every person ideally should try to keep 72 minutes, but if it's hard, then you can keep 60, you can keep 50, or minimum you can keep 45 minutes.
So the time that's listed, like let's say in calendars, is that what time is that?
Some calendars, in addition to telling you the candle lighting time, they also tell you when Shabbat leaves. And you have to check what opinion they follow. Some calendars follow the lenient opinion, some medium, and some later. So check one time how many minutes after sunset it shows, and then you'll know.
From the time Shabbat comes out in the calendar of Rabbeinu Tam, what exactly are you allowed to do and not allowed to do?
You mean from the,
On the calendar, Shabbat ends 1 hour later.
let's say Shabbat ends on the calendar 60 minutes, and then Rabbeinu Tam is 72, and you're asking, you're still strict with yourself not to do work, but are there things that you can still do? So yes, for example, if the next day is Yom Tov, if the next day is Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, and it happens to be right after Shabbat, we know that on Shabbat you're not allowed to prepare for weekday. And not only that, you're not allowed to prepare on Shabbat for even a holiday. So even though, let's say, Pesach falls out on Motzei Shabbat, Sunday, Saturday night and Sunday, and you're having a lot of people coming for Seder, and you need to set the table, you need to put the plates and the chairs and all the whole kara. Are you allowed to do it on Shabbat? No. Are you allowed to do it after sunset? No. But there comes a time when it's already a safek, and we rule that after 25 minutes you can already prepare for another day if it's for a mitzvah. So for example, for Pesach Seder or for Yom Tov meal, you can wait 25 minutes and then start preparing without doing any work, without lighting fire or electricity, but you can already do things that are permitted on Shabbat, and the only reason they're forbidden is because it's preparation for the next day. But since it's already 25 minutes after sunset, you can already be lenient with them. Now, unlike Kiddush, by Havdalah wine, we're supposed to pour so much that it should spill over. Not a lot, but a little bit. And then we use that wine that spilled over to put out the candle. We don't pour wine over the candle, but rather we dip the candle into the wine. And unlike Kiddush, where we add 3 drops of water into our cup, by Havdalah we don't add 3 drops of water. Okay. 3 drops of water we usually add by Kiddush into the cup of wine. And that is because wine represents strict justice, judgment, and water represents kindness. And so we want that the kindness should sweeten the judgment. Kindness should overpower the judgment. And therefore, we add water on top of wine. But for both meals, just 3 drops. But for Havdalah, we don't do that. We try to keep Shabbat longer because we are creating more holy time in our life. Weekdays are considered not holy compared to Shabbat. So by extending time of Shabbat, we're extending our days of blessing. Additionally, on Shabbat, the fire of Gehinnom is put out. And so all those that transgressed during their lifetime, they have rest on Shabbat if they kept Shabbat. So if a person did any other mistakes and he's being punished in the Gehinnom, on Shabbat he has rest. And as long as there is one Jew in the world that is still keeping Shabbat, the fire of Gehinnom doesn't start. And so we try to keep the fire, the Shabbat longer to help the people.
I have a question. Is that why I heard there's some people who keep it until Tuesday?
Could be. For these 2 reasons. Not so many people you're going to find, but many people do for a couple hours, 3 hours after Shabbat finishes, they still don't do Havdalah. For the spices, before you make the blessing, you have to first smell it a little bit, just to make sure that your nose works, and thank Hashem that it works. Sometimes it happens that a person has a cold, or when they light the match to light the candle, the smoke penetrates the nose and then you're not sensitive anymore. So just test it to make sure you can smell. And if you cannot, then you have to give it to someone else to make the blessing.
You said not to take the wine and pour it on top of the fire, but instead take the fire and dip it. What's the reason?
The reason why we don't spill additional wine on top of the candle, but rather we dip the candle into wine that's already spilled, is because we're not supposed to waste anything useful. And since we already have wine that's spilled in a cup, in the plate, just use that, right? Otherwise, it's bal tashchit.
Silly question, but if you're doing Havdalah by yourself and you don't, oh, actually you do drink. Yeah, exactly. So what do you
Yeah.
waste that wine, right? You can't
Just like by kiddush, you're supposed to have a cup for Havdalah that holds 3 ounces minimum, and you're supposed to drink from that more than by kiddush. By kiddush, we say if you drink 2 ounces, it's enough. By Havdalah, you should drink 3 ounces because afterwards you need to make a blessing ala gefen. And you can only make that blessing if you drink 3 ounces. And then whatever else is left in the cup, you can share with others. There's a custom that women don't drink from the wine of Havdalah unless they themselves make it. But if you have wine left and you don't want to spill it, what you do is you first pour from the bottle of wine into the cup a little more, and only then you pour it back into the wine bottle. And that is because when you drink from a cup, that wine is considered pagum, blemished, because somebody drank from it. But by pouring fresh wine on top of that, you fix that problem. Whether it's for kiddush or after Havdalah. Let's say before you make kiddush, your child comes over and tries some of the wine. So then you cannot use that wine for kiddush. So what do? You pour a little bit more wine, fresh wine, into the cup.
Are you allowed to use that same wine for kiddush later on? Or are you not allowed to?
Wine that someone drank from?
No, I mean if you're going
You're
to do the
pouring it
bottle
back.
and you pour it back.
Yes, once you fix it by pouring fresh wine in, it becomes good again, and you can pour it back into the bottle.
Or we can't use that cup, like let's say if I make kiddush in the morning and leave it for my husband, it has to be rinsed out.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't reuse the same cup without rinsing it first. So if somebody used that cup to make kiddush, and then guests come, or you make kiddush in the morning and then your husband comes, he should not use the same cup. You can fix it by adding more wine, or you can spill it into another cup, rinse the cup, and then put the wine back and add more wine to make it new cup of wine.
So just adding would be also sufficient?
Adding would also be okay, yes.
Sorry.
What do we do if someone cannot drink wine?
If somebody cannot drink wine, you either let someone else make kiddush, or the person himself makes kiddush and just drinks a drop, and someone else drinks 2 ounces.
Let's say Saturday morning, Shabbat morning. There's no one else.
Yes, Saturday morning, we said last week that for Saturday morning we're lenient that if you cannot make kiddush on wine because of alcohol or grape juice because of too much sugar, you can make kiddush on any other liquid except for water, like milk or coffee or juice. You can make kiddush on that. For a woman, we're lenient. For a man, we ask that he should make kiddush on wine or grape juice. If that's not available,
So a person can
then we move to other liquid. Yes. Shabbat morning, for a lady, that's okay. To make kiddush on coffee, milk.
the bracha or the whole reading?
If you can make the entire kiddush, make the entire kiddush. If not, at least read a paragraph. If not, at least read one sentence. Al ken berach Hashem et yom HaShabbat ve'ikacheu. And then you just say shakol and you drink it. And that's considered your kiddush. Now, after we make the blessing for the wine, for Havdalah, we transfer the cup into the left hand. Since we made the blessing on it, we're still keeping it in our hands. And we take the besamim, the spices, with our right hand, and we make the blessing. And depending if it's considered grass or herb, we make izbeh. If it's from a tree, we make atzeh, and if it's a mixture or unknown, we make minei besamim. Ashkenazim always make minei besamim, whether it's from tree, ground, or mixture, we differentiate. Then you smell it, you pass it around, the wine is still in your left hand, then someone holds the candle, or the candle is on the table, you put your thumb inside and you cover your fingers over your thumb of your right hand, and you look at the reflection of the candlelight in your fingernails.
Why not the thumb?
Kabbalistically, not the thumb, I'm not sure why. If, yeah, if you wear nail polish, that's fine. That's fine.
See it better with the nail polish.
And when you make the blessing for the candle, you have to be close enough to the candle that you can benefit from the light. If the candle is on the other side of the room and you just see the light, but you're not really getting any light that you can see, let's say, to read from or see your nails, then you cannot make a blessing on it. So
Move that candle around. Or it's
they can move the candle around, but then you have to make your own blessing, because let's say someone made the big blessing.
No, it's everybody's sitting at one table for the Havdalah, I'm saying. If it's a big table, you can move.
Yes, yeah, you can pass it around, yes.
You still have to say your own blessing?
No, then you don't.
Okay.
And if you're not the one who's holding the cup of wine, you're supposed to put two hands or just the one?
Just one at a time.
If you,
Because you said the husband is holding the wine cup.
yes,
And he's using the right hand.
yes, so everybody just uses their right hand,
Oh.
yes, only the right hand.
You don't have to do left hand? Not the left hand? Just
No, just the right hand, yes. Okay. Now, just another few brief halachot about Shabbat day itself, and then we're going to go to speaking to non-Jew.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes, sorry. The Havdalah.
Yes.
I've seen people do the whole dipping thing.
That's afterwards. After you finish
There's not enough
Havdalah,
wine.
yeah, after you finish Havdalah, there's a custom to dip your finger into the wine and then put that wine on your bone in the back of your head or on your forehead or in your pockets, and that is done to bring some of Shabbat with you into the work week,
Okay.
the memory of
Finger or
Shabbat.
fingers?
One finger is enough. And then people do more. But one finger is enough. And if you have so many people that the wine dried up, you can add a little more.
Can I ask an additional question? You said in terms of the
Okay. We're not allowed to fast on Shabbat. Sometimes when a person saw a very disturbing dream and he cannot calm down, and he's worried, what does that dream mean? And he's worried that it means something chas v'shalom not good, so then he is allowed to fast on Shabbat. But since we have a law that you're not allowed to fast on Shabbat, he should choose another day during the week and fast another day for the fact that he had to fast on Shabbat. But under normal circumstances, we don't fast on Shabbat unless it's Yom Kippur. And therefore, we're not supposed to fast even half of the day. It's considered a fast if you didn't eat anything until midday Jewish time, which is now around 1 p.m. Sometimes it's 12 p.m. So therefore, if you're waiting for your husband to come from synagogue and he's delayed, you shouldn't wait more than midday. And therefore you should make your own kiddush and eat something. And the same thing for men. They should not delay coming home until after midday. And the prayers shouldn't continue past that. If they're making kiddush, they can finish right before, make kiddush, eat, and then they can continue socializing. But if they don't have kiddush in the synagogue, and after the prayers he wants to talk or he wants to learn, he should not do it past midday. However, if before he left to synagogue he had coffee or he drank some water, with that already he fulfilled the obligation not to fast, and that's okay. And yes. Keep in mind that we're going to have 3 meals on Shabbat plus Melava Malka, and therefore don't overeat by each meal. Friday night, don't overeat because it's not good to eat before you go to sleep. Shabbat day, don't overeat because you have Sudah Shlishit. Sudah Shlishit, don't overeat because you have Melava Malka. And of course, Melava Malka, don't overeat because it's not healthy to overeat. Yes.
I missed for the Havdalah when you said you use your pinky for the wine, and where do you put this wine?
You put it on the bone that basically connects your spine with the skull, the first bone after your skull. That's called the luz. And it says that this bone is the one that is used by Hashem for resurrection, and that it feeds only from Melava Malka and from this wine that we make Havdalah with.
You don't put it on the eyes or
You can put it on the eyes, you can put it anywhere. Again, besides the bone loose, it serves as a reminder, memory of Shabbat, to bring Shabbat with you into the week.
What if you fall asleep, like, even after and you miss like the third meal and Havdalah?
If you fell asleep and you missed third meal and it's already 13 minutes past sunset, you can't do anything. You missed it. If you wake up and it's already a few hours after Shabbat, you still didn't miss Havdalah. You can still make Havdalah, the full Havdalah, until the morning. But if it's already the morning, let's say you woke up the next morning, Sunday morning, then you still have to make Havdalah, but without candles. The bracha on candles we only say Motzei Shabbat, Saturday night.
Is there a specific time, like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, or?
Anytime. Once it's dawn, once it's after dawn, that's too late to make the blessing for fire. Okay, and now briefly about prayers on Shabbat. On every prayer of Shabbat is different, unlike weekday where all 3 prayers are the same. Friday night we say one, Shabbat day another, and Mincha a third one. And plus we say Musaf. Now what if a person is praying Friday night, Shabbat prayer, and they forgot and they started their weekday prayer? So then he can still finish the blessing and then start the Shabbat prayer. The first 3 blessings and the last 3 blessings are the same. The middle blessings are different. So if by mistake he started saying the middle blessing and he caught himself, finish the blessing and then go to Shabbat prayer. This is true for the 3 regular prayers: Friday night, Shabbat morning, and Mincha, afternoon prayer. But Musaf, since it's an additional prayer, it has a different set of laws, and therefore there, wherever you are, if you catch yourself, just stop right away, even in the middle of the blessing, and switch right away to Shabbat middle blessings. So for example, if after Hakel HaKadosh you started saying Ata Honen, once you say the word Honen, you started the weekday blessing. If you only said the word Ata, you can still switch to Ata Kidashta or Ata Ehad by Friday night and Mincha. Shabbat day, Shabbat morning, it right away starts with a new word. It starts with Yismach Moshe. So if you say Ata, that's too late. You have to finish the blessing. Once you started the first blessing, Ata Honen, you have to finish the blessing and then start Yismach Moshe. Or Friday night, Ata Kidashta. Or for Mincha, Ata Echad. Now, women are allowed to pray all prayers. The custom of women not to pray Musaf, but if a woman wants to pray Musaf, she's allowed to. Any questions about what we learned so far? Now we're going to spend a few minutes about speaking to a non-Jew on Shabbat. We're not allowed to ask a non-Jew to do anything that we ourselves are not allowed to do. Whether it is Torah prohibition or a rabbinic prohibition. If you cannot do it yourself, you cannot ask a goy. And in most cases, you cannot even hint to a non-Jew. In fact, if a non-Jew does work for you on his own, you didn't ask him, it still is forbidden for you to derive benefit from his work. Yes?
What about like if you have a cleaning lady or somebody that helps you around the house and they already know prior to Shabbat to like do stuff?
Yes, and therefore, if you have a cleaning lady, she can still come. However, she can only do things that you would be allowed to do, like washing dishes, since you're allowed to wash dishes on Shabbat, so she's also allowed to wash dishes on Shabbat. You can sweep the floor, she can also sweep the floor. But she wouldn't be able to do things that you cannot do.
So if she
Like,
has to turn on the AC or like turn
yes,
on the lights.
if she is hot and she wants to turn on AC for herself, she can. But to do it for you, she cannot.
You're allowed to, you're allowed to say like it's sweet.
On Shabbat, you're allowed to sweep the floor. Washing the floor is more of a problem, but sweeping the floor is allowed.
I heard that you need like a separate room for Shabbat. Is that true?
In the olden times, they had brooms that would break, and because of that, they need a special broom for Shabbat. But nowadays, we don't have that issue. Most brooms are not made from natural fibers, and it's fine.
Am I allowed to use my baby, like if I put my baby by the light switch, he turns it on? Or like same thing with the...
You're not supposed to put your baby by the light switch and hint or instruct or push his hand. If
do anything.
yeah, don't even put him next to. If the baby by himself goes and turns the light on or off, that's fine. But you should not cause him to do it.
Okay, about the cleaning lady part or whatever. If I tell them, if I ask them to please wash the dishes, and they upon themselves decide to use the dishwasher, like how does that work?
So ideally, you tell them not to use vacuum cleaner and not to use dishwasher. They can turn on hot water, because the reason why they're turning on hot water is just to make it easier on their hands. So they're doing it for themselves, not for you. The dishes can be washed as well with cold water. Maybe it's going to take more time. If she decides to turn on the dishwasher and you just were not watching, okay, you don't have to stop her. But ideally, it's just not the right thing for appliances to be working on Shabbat.
I thought that if you don't specify, but if you just say vaguely, it's allowed.
No,
Like
no.
if I go to my neighbor, let's say that's not Jewish, and I say, oh, it's too hot in my apartment. and
We're
she
gonna,
decides to
yes,
come
we're
and
gonna
say,
learn about rules when you're allowed to hint to a non-Jew, when you're allowed to actually say what you need to a non-Jew. But under normal circumstances, in most cases, you're not allowed to say, you're not allowed to hint, and even if they do it on their own, you're not supposed to derive benefit from it.
If let's say the child turned on the hot water, and can you continue washing the dishes in hot water, or
Yes. You should not continue. Yeah, you should turn it off. Um, if you notice that from week to week your children are making mistakes and they're playing with the light or they're turning hot water, so then either tape the light, close the light, or turn off the bulbs. Or if you have a light switch where you can pull on it and turn it off, and then they're not gonna be able. So do that. If you know that it's gonna happen, plan for it. And the same thing with hot water. If you know your children like to play with water, so turn off the faucet underneath the sink.
I thought the hot water is for people who live in houses, right? If you live in a building, you can use it.
I'm sorry, I heard that if your whole line is Jewish, you're not.
Yes. If you live in a I'm gonna say it briefly, but we're gonna say it again when we learn about it. If you live in a private house, you shouldn't use hot water on Shabbat. If you live in an apartment building where the majority of people are non-Jewish, you are allowed to use hot water, because we assume that at any given time somebody already opened hot water for themselves and therefore you can benefit from it. But if you live in a Jewish building, then you cannot rely on it.
Is there a percentage, or I know my neighbor.
Majority. There has to be a majority of people using that boiler have to be non-Jewish.
So you have to count everyone's.
You approximate. Yes.
Is that a leniency or?
It's a leniency because we're not sure. We're not sure. Maybe nobody is using it. Yes.
We're allowed to wash dishes on Shabbat if we need those dishes, right?
You're allowed to wash dishes on Shabbat if you think you might need them, yes. And you're allowed to wash cups whenever, because we always need to drink. We don't have a set time for drinking. For meals, we know we have these specific meals, and if we finish, let's say, the third meal, and I'm not planning to eat anymore, so I'm not washing any dishes. With cups, I always might need a drink, and therefore you're always allowed to drink, to wash cups.
Even though you use the sponge that's allowed for Shabbat, you're still not allowed to wash dishes that are extra?
Since we're not allowed to prepare on Shabbat for weekday, if you know for sure that these dishes I'm not going to use on Shabbat, and the only reason why I'm doing it is to prepare for next day, that's not allowed. However, if, let's say, you're worried that insects might come, and then it becomes your Shabbat need. Or if you have no place to put dishes and you need to use the counter or you need to use the sink, so then you're allowed to wash the dishes and dry them and put them away so that you have space to work. But again, if your intention is to make your job easier, Motzei Shabbat or Sunday, then you're not supposed to wash dishes.
What if you just can't stand having dirty dishes in the sink?
Ideally, you should read about how to let go of things, how not to worry about things, how to be calm and focused on what's important in life. But if nevertheless it bothers you that particular Shabbat, you can. Yes.
So if Shabbat allows to do Rabbeinu Tam, and we're not allowed to prepare any time before Rabbeinu Tam, like do things that are.
If it's for a mitzvah, you can. Otherwise, it's better to enjoy Shabbat and do it afterwards. We're going to speak more about washing dishes and using hot water in later classes. Yes?
So for dishes, you have to use an actual different sponge for Shabbat?
It has to be a sponge that doesn't absorb water, so that when you pick it up, without squeezing, all the water is going to naturally drip out. The soap has to be any liquid soap, and it can either be a rubber sponge, or they have special sponges that inside that doesn't have the same material as a regular sponge. or you just put on gloves and use your gloves without a sponge.
Sponge that you use to wash yourself, those type of sponges, is that permissible, really?
You're saying because that sponge doesn't absorb.
That's the one they're selling, those
Mine has like something.
Oh, you're saying the plastic thread.
Yeah, the colorful ones.
Yeah, so that makes sense that if you pick it up, no water stays. If there are some droplets, that's okay. What we mean is that when you squeeze it, the whole stream comes out. Yes, thank you.
Wait, Rabbi, so then I can use that in the shower on Shabbat if it doesn't move the slufa?
We don't shower on Shabbat in hot water. If you want to shower in cold water, you could use that sponge, yes.
Building is not Jewish?
In general, it's a separate law for not showering in hot water on Shabbat. Parts of your body you could wash with hot water on Shabbat, and if necessary, you could use that particular sponge that doesn't absorb.
How can you wash with hot water? Not allowed to
Can you
turn
go
on
to
hot water.
For example, let's say you have an urn. We're going off the topic, but if you have an urn with hot water, you take a little bit water, hot water, you add some cold water, you make warm water, and then you can wash parts of your body. Okay, now continuing with asking a non-Jew, even before Shabbat, I cannot ask a non-Jew to do something for me on Shabbat. And that answers your question. If it's a cleaning lady and I instruct her before Shabbat, come on Shabbat and do this, I'm not allowed. And even if she knows on her own, I don't have to tell her at all, still she's not allowed to do things that I'm not allowed to do unless she's doing it for herself. She's opening hot water for herself, that's fine. She's turning light on because it's dark in the room, that's fine. And then you can use that light because she turned it on for herself. If you tell her sweep, and without you noticing, she grabbed the vacuum cleaner and she vacuumed, that's okay. Ideally, tell her not to use it. But if she did it anyway, since there is a permissible way to do it, just with a broom, if she grabs the vacuum cleaner, it's okay, but you cannot tell her to do it. Also, if she decides to wash the floor, you don't have to stop her because there is a permissible way of washing floors on Shabbat, and that is by first sprinkling the water on the floor and then just wiping it with dry cloth. And even though she does it opposite, she first makes the cloth wet, but she's doing it for herself, just to make her life easier instead of sprinkling and then wiping.
Yeah, but she's washing the floors for me, you know?
Yes, you're not allowed to tell her to wash the floors, but if you just tell her clean up and sweep and she decides to wash it, that's fine. Or you can tell her wash the floors by spraying some water and then wiping it. And if she decides to not listen and to squeeze the shmata, then you don't have to stop her.
Sorry, one more question. I heard that if you're paying them by the hour, they're not allowed to come on Shabbat.
That's a good point, that with cleaning lady that comes on Shabbat, of course you cannot pay her on Shabbat itself, and even after Shabbat, don't pay her per hour for Shabbat, just pay her a general amount for the time that she spent not only on Shabbat, but on a weekday also. So if she stayed after Shabbat for an hour, or she came before Shabbat for an hour, pay her the whole amount at once, not per hour for Shabbat. Okay. What if you have a sick person in the house? So then we're lenient and you're allowed to ask a non-Jew to do something for you. Now here it depends if the individual is lightly sick or very sick. If he is a little bit sick, you're allowed to ask a non-Jew to do rabbinic prohibition on Shabbat. What is a rabbinic prohibition on Shabbat? For example, moving muktzeh, moving something that is muktzah. For example, you have a sick patient and there is a candle burning in his room and he can't fall asleep, so you can ask a non-Jew to move the candle. As we said last class, moving a candle is prohibited as muktzah, and therefore you can ask the non-Jew to do it. Or, for example,
But only for that person.
for the sick individual, yes.
For that person.
Or, for example, you need medicine and you don't have, so you can ask a non-Jew to take money and to go to a store and buy medicine, because buying and selling on Shabbat is only rabbinically prohibited. And even though he might drive, but he's doing it on his own. He can walk there, he chooses to drive, that's okay. You just tell him, can you please, let's say you go to a neighbor and you say, I don't have medicine, can you please go from me to a pharmacy and get me medicine?
Do you have to hint it? Is that like
No,
you
for
have
that
to
you don't even
buy?
you don't even have to hint it. You can say, buy me medicine. Just don't tell him drive to, but you can tell him go.
If it's just a rabbinic prohibition buying and selling, why can't we buy medicine ourselves?
Because it's rabbinically prohibited for a Jew to do it. For a non-Jew, it's permitted for you to ask them if it's for a lightly sick individual. However, if a person is very sick, for example, his whole body hurts, or he's in bed, or then you can ask the non-Jew to do anything, even a Torah prohibition, openly.
Like drive to the hospital?
You can say to turn on fire, cook something.
Are we allowed to drive to the hospital? Yeah.
If there is danger to life, then even the Jew himself can do Torah prohibitions on Shabbat. So if there is no danger to life, you can ask a non-Jew to drive to the hospital. If there is danger to life, then you yourself either call the ambulance or you yourself drive the patient to the hospital.
But how do you decide if it's dangerous to life?
If you are not sure, you're allowed to be stringent, just in case, to save person's life. So when in doubt on Shabbat if it's dangerous or not, if you're truly in doubt, then you always go in favor of saving a person's life. Not to use it as an excuse, but if there is a doubt, I'm not a doctor, I don't know, I would have to call a doctor or I would have to take them to emergency room to find out. I'm allowed to do it because human life comes first.
Can it be more than one Jew taking that person to the emergency room, or it just has to be one?
Like, let's say the parents, could they take
Yeah,
the child to
yeah.
the emergency?
As long as the job is going to be done better, then more than one Jew is able to do it. For example, the person needs the comfort, and if both parents come, he's going to feel better. So then for dangerously ill person, we not only heal him, but we also make him comfortable. Because if he's worried or if he's uncomfortable, that can cause his condition to deteriorate. And therefore, even more than one person can escort him to the hospital.
If the Jew does not keep Shabbat, let's say, are you allowed to ask him at all, or you're not allowed?
Even though we said at the beginning that a Jew that does not keep Shabbat has a halachic status as a non-Jew, but that does not allow us to treat him as a non-Jew. He has for himself the stringencies of a non-Jew, which means if he touches the wine, we cannot drink it. If he cooks, preferably we shouldn't eat it. However, we cannot ask them to do anything, because then we are actually causing the Jew to transgress.
Are you allowed to invite them over, and if, let's say, they choose to come in the car?
Yeah, if you have relatives that want to visit you on Shabbat and you're worried that they're not going to walk, so then you have to first tell them you're welcome to come for us for the entire Shabbat. Come Friday before Shabbat, we have room by us or by neighbors, and stay for the entire Shabbat. If they say, no, it's okay, we're going to come Friday, but we're going to leave on Shabbat, that's okay, because you are telling them, come and stay. I'm going to have everything ready for you. If you change your mind, you can stay. But that only works for Friday night, because they can come before Shabbat. But if they tell you, no, we're going to drive on Shabbat, or Shabbat morning, then if you know for sure they're going to drive, then you cannot tell them.
Same thing for holidays.
And the same for holidays.
What if you don't know?
If you don't know, if there is a chance that they will walk, and when they walk, there is a chance they will walk back as well, or if they drive before Shabbat and there's a chance they'll stay, as long as there is a realistic chance that they're not going to transgress because of you, you're allowed to invite them. However, if you know that for sure they're going to transgress, then you're not allowed to invite them. If they come by themselves, that's a different story. You don't have to chase them out. You can still welcome them and feed them and try to keep them by you as long as possible so that they don't drive back, and encourage them to stay or to walk back, and maybe offer to escort them all the way to their home. And even if they decide to drive, that's not your fault, because they came on their own. Now, another leniency we have with asking a non-Jew is the first 13 minutes after sunset on Friday night.
13 or 30?
13, 1, 3. And that is the time that's considered Bein Hashmashot, twilight period. During that time, we are allowed to ask a non-Jew openly if we need something for Shabbat. So for example, you forgot to turn on the light, to turn off the oven, to take out the bulb in the refrigerator, so you can quickly, during those 13 minutes, even if you lit already candles, even though it's after Shkia, you can quickly go to a neighbor and ask them to come and do whatever you need openly, without hinting. Yes.
After these 15 minutes, when you light the candles, it's 18 minutes before. I've heard from some people that after, you can't light any time after, and then some people have like a leniency when you light up.
Yeah. Just as an aside, I'm going to stop with new information now. We're going to finish speaking to a non-Jew next time, and we're going to next week go into already the 39 melachot, the 39 forbidden labors on Shabbat. And the next 5 classes, this is class number 3, next 5 classes we're going to spend on the 39 melachot. So to answer your question, you're supposed to light candles 18 minutes before sunset, and then if you didn't have a chance to do that, you still have those 18 minutes to light. Ideally, you light before 18 minutes, 18 minutes before sunset, but b'diavad, you can still use those 18 minutes.
So the 13 minutes.
13 minutes is after sunset.
After the 18 minutes.
Yes. Yes, just don't, make sure not to confuse candle lighting time with sunset, Shkia. If your calendar shows the time for Shkia, then right at that time and on, you can no longer light.
Is there a reason why it's so specific in terms of 13 and 18?
Yes, because that period is considered twilight. After 13 minutes, there are already many opinions that hold that already night began, which means Shabbat began. After sunset, we have some opinions that hold that the new day began. So for Shabbat, we're strict. For rabbinic laws, if necessary, you can still be lenient within the first 13 minutes because you have various opinions. But after 13 minutes, already most opinions say it's Shabbat for sure. And therefore, we cannot be lenient anymore after 13 minutes.
Is it good to say Shabbat early?
Of course. Just like we said, you should keep Shabbat as long as you can Motzei Shabbat, so too you should accept Shabbat as early as you can before Shabbat. For Ashkenazim, it's an hour and 15 minutes before sunset. For Sephardim, there are different opinions, anywhere from hour and 15 minutes before sunset to 40 minutes before sunset. So, to be on the safe side, you can light candles and pray evening prayer and accept Shabbat 40 minutes before sunset. And that's the custom in Yerushalayim, that they light candles 40 minutes before sunset.
And what is the halacha regarding taking out the garbage for householders? Let's say on Shabbat in the morning, for example, the truck is gonna come to take all the garbage.
Yeah. So we spoke about last week, and I'm going to add one more detail. Since garbage is considered something that you don't want around, you're allowed to take it out from your house to the outside. However, once you take it out of your private domain, you can only continue carrying if there is eruv. If there is eruv in your area, you can put it in a place that you want. If you live in a building and when you open the door, the light goes on, so you cannot put it in that room.
So, what is considered eruv for the Sephardi? By the Ashkenazi, they hold string. We need a wall, no?
So according to the more strict opinion, for Sephardim, you need majority of the area surrounded with eruv to be surrounded by a wall. A real enclosure. And here in Queens we have that in Forest Hills and Riga Park and parts of Kew Garden Hills. You are on the border, so I don't know if you fit in. But on the website, on the Beit Gavriel website, you have a map of the eruv that is kosher even for Sephardim. And that approximately goes from Woodhaven Boulevard until Grand Central Parkway, and it goes from LIE until Union Turnpike.
Oh, it's the
And
metal, right? The whole.
and that is because these highways are either above ground or underground, and that forms a wall.
But doesn't it have to be a full cover?
Majority of it has to be covered by a wall, and then the minority we can use the string. And according to a more lenient Sephardi opinion, we can rely on the Ashkenazi eruv, and therefore those that need, they can be lenient and rely on the regular Queens eruv even outside. And those that are strict, at least in Forest Hills, Riga Park,
Do we have anything here?
there is eruv here, Ashkenazi eruv, yes.
What if the eruv is, does it have to be like straight, or what if it's like this?
Leave it up to the rabbi in charge of the eruv, and he knows the laws, and there is a hotline or group messaging that tells you before Shabbat if it's up or down.
Because the Rav said that it's up, and after he said it's up, because we live right next to the construction site, after he said it's up, after a few hours, the rain came down and it became like this. So now we're thinking, what's the story?
Yeah,
We
so
can't call the Rav Shabbat already, so what do we do in this case?
if you see that something happened to eruv, then you have to stop carrying. But you don't have to tell others.
What do you mean? You have to protect others from sinning.
Yeah. So since this is a rabbinic law, and they're doing it with understanding that it's kosher, you don't have to inform them. But whoever knows, they have to stop.
Don't tell others.
Okay, one
Don't tell
I'm in
others.
my mother's house, and my parents and us and all this have to leave, and I have a stroller. Now, I hold that I'm not gonna go. So my ema says, why not coming out? What am I gonna say? My stomach says I'm gonna stay? I mean, like,
Yeah, so if necessary, you say, but you just don't have to announce it.
If they ask you.
Not that you are forbidden. Okay, yes.
I have a question. Let's say I latest time, like right before, 8 minutes before sunset. Can I ask my children to do things light switches or light bulbs.
We mentioned this during the first class, that if you accepted Shabbat but other people in your family didn't yet, you are allowed to ask them as long as it's before sunset, whether your husband or your children.
But they don't do it, I don't know.
Yeah,
You
if
guys
they
take care, mommy. I
yes,
didn't
if
accept it.
yeah, if they didn't actively accept Shabbat, you can ask them before sunset.
And one more question, I apologize. Can you please define what is a little sick mean again? It's just like a sore throat.
Yeah.
No, the little sick is anything less than being bedridden or the entire body hurts. If the entire body hurts or he has severe pain that he cannot handle or severe headache, person cannot function normally, that's severe. If he can function normally, just he has a cold, he's sneezing, he's allergy, that's little.
So that would be allowed for rabbinical prohibitions to ask openly for. So let's say.
Yes, so a little bit sick, you can ask a non-Jew for rabbinic prohibitions. Bedridden or entire body hurts, a person cannot function normally, you can ask the non-Jew to do anything.
What are we doing in case, let's say, in the middle of the night, what is this thing called? The thing that they have for the smell?
Alarm.
Carbon monoxide alarm goes on, and now there's nobody around. How do we shut the thing off?
So, is there a way to shut it off?
No, you gotta
Doesn't
lose
happen,
on
is it?
it.
Yeah.
Once turn it off.
So in this case, we say that it is permitted because if you don't do it, if something does happen, you're not going to know. So you need to first reset it, and then it's going to be active again.
You are allowed.
Yeah.
You have to reset your allowed.
If you don't
Shut
reset,
it off.
you're allowed to shut it off because it's dangerous if you don't. Because let's say it was a false alarm.
Shut off what?
You know, the carbon monoxide alarm.
Oh, it's the thing where.
Yeah, if you don't shut it off, and right now it was false, there was no problem. But let's say there will be an hour or two later. Let's say you put earplugs in, but now there's gonna be
A real.
smoke or fire or carbon monoxide. You're not gonna know because the alarm continues to ring, and you don't know to differentiate between one and the other. So it's dangerous, and therefore you can reset it.
Question. This, like, I already fixed the problem, but I'm just curious what I should have done before. I have certain plugs where if I plug too many things, the, whatever it's called, shuts off.
Okay.
So it has happened where it happened right on Shabbat. What am I supposed to do? And we're home Friday and Saturday. It's turning off my hot plate, my hot water urn, and, well, my microwave and my oven, but I don't use those on Shabbat. So what am I supposed to do in that case?
Yeah, so if your fuse blew and therefore electricity went out, so it depends.
Oh, and some rooms also turn
Yeah.
the lights more off.
So if it's things that you don't need, you cannot ask a non-Jew. We have an additional leniency that I didn't speak about yet, is that if it's for mitzvah for a few people, not just one individual, but for a few people, you're allowed to ask a goy.
So I cannot go and do it myself?
You cannot do it yourself, for sure not. But you can ask a non-Jew to do it if it's for the whole family, not for an individual. If it's for an individual, we tell the individual, go somewhere else. But if it's for a few people or community, public, then you're allowed to ask a non-Jew to do it. So those parts of the lights that or electricity that is necessary for Shabbat mitzvah, like you need to eat the meal, you need the light to be able to enjoy the meal, so you can ask. Preferably, there is an additional leniency if you ask one non-Jew to ask another non-Jew. This way you're not directly asking a non-Jew, but another non-Jew is asking this non-Jew. So if you have that possibility, you go to someone's house and there's, let's say, mother and daughter, you ask the mother to tell the daughter to go and help you. So if possible, if you're already asking the non-Jew to do something for you on Shabbat, try to do it asking one non-Jew that should ask another one or another non-Jew.
Okay, and then let's say my oven has a warmer. So I turn on the warmer before Shabbat starts, but I forgot to turn on the light, to keep the light on for Shabbat. And I forgot to do that. And I open the door after Shabbat starts, the light turns on. Can I close it back up?
No, if
I'm
you,
supposed to leave the oven.
yes, we're going to speak about it more next time. If you
But the warmer
opened,
is gonna continue.
so you have to ask a non-Jew to come and close it.
Directly, just like
Yes. Okay, Shavua Tov.